Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off with the president tweeting out today, 13th anniversary of the Affordable Care Act. Yes, the dreaded Obama care is now a teenager. And look, the president was spot on. Said it hasn't just survived, it's stronger than ever. Points out that 40 million people in this country now have peace of mind that comes with having health security and health coverage. He said he'll never stop fighting like hell to protect and strengthen the ACA. For those who don't know, the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known derogatorily as the dreaded Obamacare. Yes, 13 years old, and good on Biden for pointing out the fact that Republicans were against it from the beginning and have done everything they can do over the last 13 years, not only to stop it from the beginning, but to destroy it and stifle it all along. You know, I said years ago, wasn't a huge fan of the ACA because I didn't think it went far enough. There was so much more we could have, should have, and I wanted to see done. Didn't happen. But I said this could be what happened with Medicare. Again, conservatives and right-wing, crazy, no, Medicare will be bad. Medicare will destroy healthcare. And what's it done? It's given generations the ability to retire with dignity knowing that they've got health security. And look, if we expanded that health security to younger workers, say 50 and above, you'd see enormous number of people retiring, which is why they're never going to do it. But he points out, look, the Republicans have done everything they can do. Every court challenge you can imagine, sabotage from the former guy, over 50 attempts to repeal it, everything they can do. And look, states not expanding it. He says he's got a better idea. Protect, strengthen, extend. And today, the good news coming out of North Carolina, a red state, so to speak, in terms of this, they have finally legislatively decided that they are going to approve the expansion of the Affordable Care Act so people in North Carolina, low-income adults, can get health insurance. Now, again, remember, these are working class people. They're not indigent. Because what we do in this country, and I think we forget this, we take the old and the very young, and we insure them. And we take the poor, and we insure them through Medicare. Medicare is for seniors. Medicaid is for the poor and the indigent. We already take care of those. We take the most expensive people out of healthcare. The first 5 years of life, over half of the births in this country are paid for by Medicaid. And the elderly, the last 5 years of life, paid for by Medicare. We take all the real expensive stuff out of the health insurance industry, and then we hand over the profitable stuff to insurance companies, who then gouge us and rob us and charge incredible and just exorbitant premiums. And then there's co-insurance and co-payments and co-deductibles and co-this and co-that, and don't forget this. Nickel and diming you right to death. And then, obviously fighting when you're sick for the care. And I've been saying for the longest time, I want to see one insurance plan, one excellent health insurance plan, one form, one way of payment, so it streamlines our healthcare system, it streamlines the funding, and gets us to use those healthcare dollars in better ways. Preventative care would be a great idea. Taking people when they're sick would be a great idea, instead of having this Band-Aid hodgepodge system. But I'll be honest, the ACA made it into the teen years. I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought Republicans would eventually kill it. They didn't. No mission accomplished moment for the GOP, and good on them. As the president did point out, he said, look, you remember when talking to our women folk friends, Remember when just being a woman was considered a pre-existing condition? The Affordable Care Act changed that. He said MAGA Republicans in Congress may have forgotten, but I haven't. And I think that's a good shot, because every time you hear someone talk about Biden or Dark Brandon, it's always his memory's failing. He doesn't remember anything. He'll remember that. Good on him, and a good anniversary. Because look, here's the thing. I actually know people who the ACA saved their lives. We used to do these food drives, and right when this stuff was happening, we had people who came out and said, look, I got insurance for the first time in years because I had all of these pre-existing conditions, and now I have insurance, and I was able to go to see a doctor, and that doctor caught something early, and it saved my life. And I heard that story multiple times over the years. Things that used to be considered pre-existing conditions that you couldn't possibly be insured for, now people have access to insurance. That's a to steal a Joe Biden line, that's a BFD. That's a big freaking deal. And good on them for doing it. And look, I love the shot to the Republicans because they didn't get their way. Also today, I don't know if you saw the big TikTok hearing. Kathy McMorris Rogers, the chair of this committee investigating TikTok. I love how everybody, right, left, center, everybody was going after the CEO of TikTok. Everybody. And it's not like they don't deserve it. But I found bipartisanship, and I go, this is what bipartisanship looks like. Everybody is attacking TikTok. In fact, McMorris Rogers said that TikTok is a weapon. And you had everybody attacking them. They're part of the Chinese Communist government and all of this stuff. And truth, yeah, they're connected. There's all of this stuff. There's all of this information gathering. There's all this surveillance. There's all this stuff that we all know. There's all this stuff. And we've known for a long time. And it's one of these things where I go, it's lawmakers' job to pass laws. Maybe you could have thought of this, I don't know, back when this stuff started, because social media has become the Wild West from day one. Nobody bothered to go, maybe it's a bad idea to have a platform that kids sign up for without any real age verification, and then it takes all their information and their eye movements and their keystroke patterns and their photos and all of their geo tracking location stuff. Maybe giving that information, I don't know, to anyone, corporate America, the Chinese Communist government, anyone. Did no one think this was a bad idea? Now look, I'm all in favor of doing something on the TikTok front. Has to happen. Because, and this is what I love. This is the thing I actually kind of do love. People are shocked that TikTok is doing this kind of thing, that the Chinese Communist government, created this entity or helped create this entity to peddle misinformation, to peddle, disinformation, to be able to gather information, our data and all this. People are shocked. And, my first thought is, well, they learned from us, because we've been doing this for 40, 50, 60, 80 years. We've been doing this for a long time. You would think, having done this kind of stuff, we would know how to defend against it. That's the part that I'm kind of stuck with, of how inept we are at protecting our own citizens from foreign disinformation, from the kind of propaganda that, did come out in 2016. Like it or not, the Russian propaganda machine was very powerful. Now, did it make racists racist? No, but it did reinforce, and it did bring them together, and it did feed them red meat to keep them riled and all twisted up in the panties. Because that's what good disinformation does. That's what good propaganda does. It takes those things that you're hiding deep down, and magnifies them. So it's surprising to me that our people are shocked that they're using it against us. Now, for me, I looked at the hearing, and maybe something's going to happen. Maybe, I don't know. But the CEO who was taking the beating from both sides, because usually in these hearings, a CEO comes in and one side's going to be against them, one side's going to be for them. So at least you'll get half a break where you'll get attacked from one guy and you go, okay, the next guy's not going to be hard on me. I get a breather. This guy didn't get a breather from either side. He was attacked from both sides, and like I said, rightly so. But I got to give him credit. Unlike Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, he went in there and he took his comeuppance. But he shot back, and there was one point where someone was asking him, can you tell me 100% that you have no ties, and this other company that has, ties to you has no ties with the Chinese Communist government? And the guy's like, I can't say 100% because, we might use Microsoft. Uh-oh. Trouble. Insinuating that what we all know is that if you're doing business in China, you got ties to the Chinese Communist government. Think Microsoft, think Apple, think all of them, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all of them in some way, shape, or form. If they're in China, they're being influenced by the Chinese Communist government. And this is one of those things where you go, maybe we should, I don't know, make sure none of them are doing this kind of stuff. Make sure none of them are collecting our data and selling it. Making sure that maybe none of them have the ability to profit off of our information. Maybe, I don't know, stopping the creation of profiles that keep feeding us garbage. Maybe an algorithm that feeds our worst inclinations. Maybe we should stop that. Because look, I'm not against the free flow of ideas. But when your algorithm is set up in such a way that they're deciding what is popular and they're heating things up to get on your timeline, to get in front of your eyes because, hey, you stopped and looked at this. You looked at this. They're reading your eyes to see what you're looking at to feed you more content because they want you addicted to it. I mean, giant red flags for every social media user. Do you think anything like this will happen in a kumbaya kind of bipartisan way like we saw today to other ones? I seriously doubt it. But it'll be interesting to see. It will be interesting to see. Now, for me, the story of the day also was China. China says it opposes a forced sale of TikTok because evidently the Biden administration has said, look, you can keep TikTok in the country. You just have to divest from the Chinese Communist government and this Beijing parent company, ByteDance. You do that, no problems. Well, China's against it. I find it interesting that that's being played into this. But a very, very entertaining hearing. Watching both sides finally agree. Kind of refreshing for a change, where we can find an issue that we can both be on the same side with. Except if you're a TikTok user, and then you're kind of upset because I could lose my TikTok. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Does this matter? Is social media as powerful as we think it is and give it credit for or responsibility for? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on in France, but wow. 1 million people out in the streets today protesting President Macron's decision to unilaterally go against the legislature and to say, you know what, we're going to impose it. We're doing it anyway. We're going to pass for the first time in, I guess it's been a couple of decades, an increase in the retirement age. Going to move it 2 years forward. You're going to have to be 2 years older to be able to collect the retirement because, you know, hey, we got to make it solvent by making it harder for people to get. Now, what I find interesting, I find it interesting that he's denounced the violent protests that he caused by doing this because the people of France said, no, this is not what we want. And for those who don't know what this is, in case you're just kind of chiming in, they've raised the retirement age. Now, understand, we're talking about doing the same thing here in the U.S. Republicans are without shame coming out and saying, you know what, for the massive workers, you know, people my age, you're going to raise it from 67 to 70. So we're just going to put that goalpost further down the road. So 70 is where they want to go. And some have said even higher they want to go than 70. They then want to start indexing it so it gets further down the road as younger people come online. So 70 is where they wanted to go. In France, they're flipping out and rioting, basically. The town of Bordeaux was set on fire, according to headlines. Now, a couple of dumpsters and some windows were broken, so media's got to go crazy. When working people get mad and a window goes broken, it's riot time. But they're raising the age from 62 to 64. And, you know, I'm going, you know, okay, I would be okay with that. Oh, wait a minute. You would have to take ours back. We'd have to wind that back because we already had this fight. And you know what happened when they did this to us? Nothing. Nobody, not a peep out of working people. Did they riot? Did they riot? Did they protest? Were the highways shut down? You know, did people call their, no. But oh my gosh, you take some dumb TV show off of TV. Oh my God, the sky falling. What? Protect myself? Riots in the streets. What? There's a guy dressing up like a woman and dancing. Sky is falling. But screwing you out of retirement? Attacking your ability to retire? No, don't worry. And look, you know, these worker issues for some odd reason, do not come front and center in this country. I don't know what it is. I don't know if we've been beaten down so much that we now go, you know, what's the point? It's never going to matter. We're going to get screwed. We've been getting screwed for 50 years. Corporate America's got all the power. They've broken the unions down. Is it that? Is it just that hopelessness, that desperation, that feeling of powerlessness? That working people go, oh, you can't fight City Hall on these things. But, oh my gosh, you know, a dog runs off a leash. Protests. It's crazy. I mean, it really is crazy. And I talk to working people all the time, and I say, you know, do you not see what the Republican Party has been doing for 50 years? Yeah, because, you know, I look like someone who could be a Republican. I get this all the time. You should be a Republican. I thought for sure, because you're not someone who, I don't know what the image is. And I say, no, look, I've been paying attention to what's happened to my paycheck for all the years I've been working. I've been paying attention to what happens to working people in this country when we follow conservative ideology. When we follow these pro-business, and look, Democrats do it to an extent. Neoliberalism, horrible. Which is why, again, I come back to happy with Joe Biden. We're moving away from some of those things. And that's a good thing. But I keep asking, when are we going to have these moments? I look in Florida right now. Florida, their governor, who's trying to out Trump. He's trying to out hate. He's trying to do all the things he can, beat up on the libs. We're going to make the libs, we're going to get lib tears. He's going after unions right now, public sector unions, because evidently that's the right-wing chew toy. They've got to destroy those public sector unions because they still represent about a third of the industry's workforce. So you still have pretty high density in the public sector. So what we've got to do is we've got to figure out how to destroy that, even in a right-to-work state like Florida, or, as I always say, a no-rights-at-work state like Florida. They are moving a piece of legislation, basically what has been the right-wing wet dream for a very long time in these no-rights-at-work states, that if membership, dues-paying membership, falls below 50%, they gut the whole thing. Now remember, in these no-rights-at-work states, everyone paying dues to the union is purely voluntary. You get all the benefits. The union negotiates the contract. The union fights for job security, so you're not an at-will employee. There actually has to be a reason to fire you. There's a whole list of, the whole contract is open to everybody, whether you're paying dues or not in these freeloader states. And they don't want even that, because again, they don't want the contract. They want desperation. They want at-will employees. They want people scared all the time. They want people running at their will, especially people like DeSantis, people like Trump, who have already said, look, we're going to go in and we're going to make all of these government workers loyal to us. They want to bring patronage back so that they can use the government as an arm of their reward system or their punishment system. And this should anger every working person, because once they start pulling these levers for purely political purposes, we get hurt in this. We're the ones who are harmed by this. And again, I go back and I look at all of the things that are happening, all of the push to destroy child labor laws, to destroy tax laws, to benefit the wealthy and corporations. And again, who loses? We do. I look at New York. New York Power Authority just allocated a ton, or actually 10.7 megawatts of low-cost energy from this Niagara Power Project hydropower plant to the Niagara County plant Amazon facility. So we're giving low-cost, cheap energy to Amazon for them to go to a place they were going to go to anyway. And they're going to make huge profit off of. But you know what? That single mother who's struggling to keep the heat on, they want to cut LIHEAP. They want to cut her ability to keep the heat on. But you know what? The Amazon place, we're going to give them the cheap electricity. We're going to help them. And there are a couple of other places that they're giving cheap power to. But Amazon, really? Do they really need corporate welfare? And this is the kind of stuff, it's on both sides of the political aisle. This is why I reach out to everyone. These working class issues, they're important. Every single day, they're important. Protecting child labor laws, extremely important. And you look at a number of Republican states, what they're doing, we're just going to loosen those up a little bit because they're playing on us. We all had jobs when we were kids. Teaches good work ethic. And what they're actually doing is they're setting it up. They're setting it up so that your kids can compete against you in the workplace. Maybe even take your job for half the pay. Wouldn't that be conservative paradise? Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, make sure you download the podcast. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2005. That was the day 15 workers were killed and another 170 were seriously injured in an explosion at the BP refinery in Texas City, Texas. Workers were restarting a unit down for repairs. As they filled the tower with gasoline, it overflowed, sending a geyser into the air. The igniting hydrogen vapor cloud created a chain of explosions that destroyed the nearby trailer housing temporary contract workers. The explosion shed light on many key problems throughout the industry: the increasing use of contract workers, safety shortcuts, and qualitative lack of industrial process controls. A 2007 Chemical Safety Board report found that years of cost-cutting, poor worker training, and a safety culture with serious deficiencies left the plant vulnerable to catastrophe, but company leaders ignored the warning signs. OSHA fined BP $21.3 million and more, but ultimately settled for $13 million. For years, the catastrophe was studied closely to eliminate the hazards. But 10 years later, a 2015 joint investigative series by the Texas Tribune and Houston Chronicle found that, quote, there is little evidence that the 15 lives lost on that March day brought much of anything. The death toll at U.S. refineries has barely slowed. At least 64 energy company employees and contractors were killed in the decade before the blast. At least 58 have died in the 10 years since. The Department of Energy has tracked nearly 350 fires at refineries in the last 8 years, almost one a week. Refinery workers have gone on strike, demanding, among other issues, an increased emphasis on safety. For the United Steelworkers, it is a daily fight to implement the critical safety actions the union developed in the aftermath of the blast.
What's wrong with us? Our nation's moral compass, I mean. I don't like being a downer, just focusing on wrongs, but some wrongs stand out as morally abominable, such as this one. It's about hundreds of thousands of our low-income elders who, toward the end of life, when frail and most vulnerable, find themselves cast into a part of the Medicaid system that has been deliberately structured by Congress to subject them to needless deprivations and daily indignities. These are our loved ones with serious health problems who need long-term care in nursing homes, and 2/3 of them rely on Medicaid to cover their costs. To get this benefit, they surrender all of their income, which goes to defray their nursing home expenses. Of course, for a decent existence beyond mere survival, we all rely on a few little things that are basic to our humanity. So Medicare authorizes each state to set a monthly, quote, personal needs allowance so their elderly patients can cover their hygiene and grooming products, a book or CD, a small gift for grandchildren, a chocolate bar, etc. Good. But then Mr. Mingy walked in. In 1987, Congress set the minimum for this allowance at a meager $30 a month, under $8 a week. Congress has not raised it in the 36 years since, and most states still provide only a pittance, despite inflation and monopoly price gouging on practically everything. So our state and national leaders, who freely dole out massive corporate subsidies and tax giveaways to billionaires, are leaving ill seniors with so little spending money that they must ration their toothpaste and scrimp pennies to buy a rare treat from the vending machine. This is Jim Hightower saying, I know this is small in the global scale of human indignities, but that makes it an even bigger moral failure for our society. It would take so little to do so much for so many.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday on the program, gave you a little bit of homework to go and read what I think is an incredibly important article. The GOP's idea of youth Little League prom. Try working in a slaughterhouse and marrying at 10, written by Tim Noah over at the New Republic. I hope you did read it. But if you didn't, well, that's why we've asked our good friend Tim Noah to come share some thoughts on his article and where we are going politically on this issue. You know, the party of family values. You know, get those kids married and out of the household and working in those slaughter shops. Yeah, could that be the future? That's why I've asked Tim to come and share some thoughts. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So the title, is that hyperbolic?
No, I mean, I think that you do have, the Republican Party has become the party that supports child labor and child marriage. It's very hard to construe it any other way. Even in states like Wyoming, which, has a Republican legislature, and to their great credit, these legislature with two Republican supermajorities did vote to raise the marriage age from, there was no lower limit. They set it at 18, as the United Nations would like all 50 states to do, and they did this, and these Republicans did this, and the Wyoming GOP went berserk campaigning against it.
you just can't make this stuff up. And when I talk to people, I go, no, look, Iowa, look at the Iowa bill. They literally want to give the slaughterhouses immunity from kids getting hurt cleaning, saw blades. You can't make this stuff up. You look at states that are, again, like you said, try Tennessee, what they're doing with their marriage laws. I mean, I asked the question, are you being hyperbolic? Because I figured you'd go, here, blah, here are all these examples, because they're all over the place.
It's all over the place. I mean, there has been progress over the years in the states raising the marriageable age to 18, but it's been slow and it's been hard, and it has been in the face of a lot of Republican opposition.
It's crazy because what you'll hear in the defense that I hear, and you talk about it as well, is this deference to parents. We love parents. Kids, I don't know, but love the parents, especially crazy ones.
Right, and the United States is going around the world trying to tell other third world countries, you can't be marrying these kids off when they're 14 years old, and also you can't be putting these kids to work when they're 12 or 13. And we thought that we were past that in the United States, but the GOP is trying to bring it back. It's unbelievable.
I mean, this is the part that gets me. I mean, there's a lot of talk around the transgender issue and parents' rights and the marriage issue and parents' rights. And look, I don't have the answers for all of it, but what I do know is that government, shouldn't be involved in too much of it. But I think setting reasonable restrictions, on certain ages, I'm not horribly against. But getting married and working in slaughterhouses, and I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with this.
Well, yeah, I mean, the argument. Well, let's take them one by one. The sort of child labor. You're seeing legislatures pushing to ease restrictions on child labor, and we've seen 2 bills signed into law in the last few months, both by kind of Republican darlings. One of them by Sarah Sanders in Arkansas, and the other by Chris Sununu in New Hampshire. It's unbelievable that politically ambitious people are signing these bills into law. It really makes you wonder what appeals to the base these days.
Well, do you think it has to do with the fact that so many people, especially my age, look back on our childhood and have these memories of, we got our first job, and my first job at 8 years old was I delivered the evening newspaper. And then when I was 9, I had the morning and the evening newspaper.
There is an exception. There's an exception in existing law for delivering the newspaper.
No, absolutely. So we all remember the jobs we had and the hours that we put in it because it taught work ethic. And we're thinking that it's the same kind of thing when the reality is so many kids are being exploited. I mean, you just saw the packing solutions place and all the kids that they had working for them in slaughterhouses.
In a company owned by the Blackstone Group. I mean, that just blew my mind. You had what is it? More than 100 kids were employed by this company, Packers Sanitation Services Inc., which cleans slaughterhouses overnight, and they had kids starting at the age of 13 doing this work. They were cleaning meat and bone cutting saws. I mean, it's against the law for this to happen, and they know it. And there have been some reports that the supervisors tried to pressure the kids into telling the truth about their age. And this is a company owned by the Blackstone Group. And of course, the Blackstone Group can say, well, this is completely unacceptable. We had no idea.
It's a third party group. We didn't know.
My guess is they weren't curious either. They probably didn't put a lot of effort into finding out whether these practices were occurring.
But the thing that gets me, and I've had a number of these conversations with people who want to say, no, kids should have jobs, and I agree, everyone should have a first job, and
they're allowed to have jobs.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But the idea of we're now going to have them competing against their parents in dangerous conditions, I'm struggling with. And then my favorite part is you brought up parental rights. The Huckabee bill, does away with work permits basically. and parental rights.
They no longer basically said we're not going to check the ages of these kids who go to work, and the argument for it is that yes, it interferes with parents' rights. Well, guess what? That's why that was the argument back in the early 20th century when we started passing laws against child labor. The parents were allowing this to happen, encouraging it to happen. And the law felt it had to push back. Yes, parents should be in charge of their kids most of the time, but when they abuse, when they're abusive, and I think sending a kid into a slaughterhouse overnight is abusive, then there should be a law saying you can't do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's common. Is this a point where maybe we could agree on that, where everyone might agree with that? Maybe?
Well, I take heart in the vote in the Wyoming legislature,
right.
but I'm also dispirited that the Wyoming GOP felt it had to campaign against it. And there's a guy in Tennessee who introduced a bill. Who's this guy? I forget. You can get married at 17 with parental consent. And the Republican state representative, Robert Tom Leatherwood, introduced a bill last year that eliminated the age requirement for marriage. So he wants to go back to the Stone Age. It's, I think it's partly part of the appeal for Republicans is it's a culture war issue.
Yeah, I remember the whole grooming thing, and that came up in that debate, and I remember it because there's a state rep in that area. I think his name's Ross, who actually gave a high school girl a college scholarship and then ended up marrying her a couple of years later. He was in his 40s. She was like 17. Now they're, they were over 18 when they got married, but the grooming process, I'm sure, began much sooner. That's perfectly okay.
Well, the child marriages are an absolute epidemic in the United States. We don't think of ourselves as that kind of country, but there have been 300,000 child marriages between 2000, I think it was, in 2018, and some of them as young as 10 years old. And 20% of those 300,000 involved kids, it's almost always girls, who are below the age of consent. So basically, this is legally sanctioned pedophilia.
Yeah, again, we talk about things that happen in other countries, and you said it a moment ago. We're preaching to other countries, and this stuff's happening right in our backyard. And thanks to the GOP, they're giving them the cover of law. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Tim Noah. He's a staff writer over at the New Republic. You can check out his most recent piece, GOP's idea of youth, little leagues, proms. Try working in a slaughterhouse and marrying at 10. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. So what's the messaging out of this? I've been saying Democrats need to take this and hammer on this, and especially the PSSI group, who literally had kids working overnight cleaning these packing houses. And I know they have got small hands; they can get into smaller places. I get the argument, and they're cheap and exploitable. But should Democrats take on to this and make this like a battle cry? I mean, because this is something I think people need to know about.
I think I think it's disgraceful. I mean, this is one of the first things that FDR went after in the New Deal. It was considered the most outrageous of all of the wrongs that the New Deal sought to right, was the exploitation of children. How could it not be? And the idea that we want to go back to those days is just mind-boggling.
So let me ask you this. Because, just this past weekend, I was up in Lawrence, Massachusetts. We went through the area where the Bread and Roses strike happened. Over the summer, we were up in Scranton, took a tour of a coal mine, that operated 100 years ago, and heard about all of the horrible abuses of workers, and especially children who were working on the job. I think the American people, if told this is where we're heading, would be appalled, especially if they believed it was their kids. I think why no one's as outraged as they should be is because I know it's not going to be my kids who are going to be put in that position. I know it's not going to be other middle class, white kids and upper middle class people's kids who are going to be. These are going to be immigrant kids. These are going to be poor people of color. That's who's going to be stuck in these positions.
Right. And, there was a very good New York Times expose that appeared, I think, about a month ago about specifically about these immigrant kids who were doing it. Something like 2/3 of the minors that HHS is supposed to be supervising, these migrant kids, about 2/3 of them have done child labor in violation of child labor laws. And a lot of them aren't going to school at all. And this would be a pretty good issue for Republicans to beat up Democrats about, because this is happening on Biden's watch. And we've seen a 37% increase just this year over last year in child labor. You're not hearing a peep out of Republicans. You know why? Because they support child labor.
No, I mean, they're laying the groundwork to make it perfectly acceptable. You're
They're
spot
pushing
on.
laws. There are 4 laws that have been passed just in the last year, I think, that advance child labor. One of them I don't make much of a fuss about because it was in New Jersey and they expanded the number of hours kids could work in the summertime, and I'm fine with that because they're not in school in the summertime.
No, I'm fine with that too. I mean, the reality is I want my kids to work. My kids have had jobs. But we've supervised them because I want them to learn the benefits of hard work. I want them to know when to show up on time, how to do a good day's labor, how to get the self-esteem that comes from and the self-respect of doing a job and doing all those things. I think there's some therapeutic qualities to work. I just don't want it to be under exploitive conditions like we see in a lot of these places.
Yeah, I mean the Sarah Sanders thing where there's no check. She's eliminated the age check on these kids. And in New Hampshire, they lowered, I think, to 14 the age at which kids could be working in bars and kind of clearing tables. And you don't want kids that age around alcohol. And what was the third one? Oh, the third one lowered the age of kids who could be working in child care centers. And again, you want to be very careful about who you're trusting a bunch of kids to. You want it to be somebody with some level of maturity.
No, I mean, it's crazy. Last question I've got for you. Does this end at some point? Because my mind is we're revisiting 100 years ago. My mind is all of the bad policies of 100 years ago, I think, are coming back. We're going back to the days of Lochner, where if you're a worker in this country and if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages in desperate conditions, hey, that's your right, because we're breaking up unions and destroying labor laws. And child labor, same in that same vein. This is all setting us up in a direction where, the more desperate you are, the more exploitable you are.
Absolutely. If you support the New Deal, suddenly that makes you some crazy extreme leftist in this country. And the New Deal achieved great things for this country, and the Republicans are systematically trying to repeal it and send us back into the 19th century.
Yeah, as I say, they're attempting to repeal the 20th century and doing a pretty good job of it because we're still focused on the division and all the outrage candy they feed us, while their legislatures are doing really horrible things under the cover of crazy. But Tim, I appreciate the time. Great article. I hope people will take a look at it. GOP's idea of youth. Little League prom. Try working in a slaughterhouse and marrying at 10. 10 at 10, written by Tim Noah, staff writer over at the New Republic. Tim, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Again, make sure you check out his article. We'll get links out on social media, how you can do that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day the trial of 101 industrial workers of the world began in Chicago. Their alleged crimes? Speaking out against U.S. involvement in World War I. They were tried under the Espionage Act, but they were really targeted for prosecution because of their outspoken and radical labor organizing. In Chicago, 87 members of the union were held in the Cook County Jail for nearly a year before their trial. The so-called evidence in the case consisted mainly of newspaper articles and letters written by the IWW members. Most of them were before the U.S. had even entered the war. The trial lasted until August. The presiding judge was Kenshaw Mountain Landis, who shortly after the verdict would leave the bench to become the commissioner of Major League Baseball. In all, 150 Wobblies faced charges in Chicago, Wichita, Kansas, and Sacramento, California. Many received harsh sentences ranging from 5 to 25 years in prison. One of those convicted was Ralph Chaplin, the author of the labor anthem Solidarity Forever. In Leavenworth Prison, he continued to write verse. His poems reflected his yearning for freedom, including the lines, "Somewhere the dawn breaks laughing o'er the sea. To splash with gold the city's domes and towers, and countless men seek visions wide and free. In that alluring world that is now ours. But no one there could prize as much as we the open road, the smell of grass and flowers." In 1924, the last IWW prisoner from these trials was finally released from prison. But the crackdown had taken a major toll on labor organizations across the nation. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, I mean, this for me is one of those dividing lines. Which side are you on moment, if you will, to go back to the labor frame. Are we going to make, child labor great again? You want your kids working, 40, 50 hours? I was looking at a conversation on Twitter today between a couple of guys, and there was this guy saying when he was 14 years old, he was working 50, 60 hours a week because he claims he wanted to. Now, granted, he wasn't probably making minimum wage. He admitted was working under the table, no workers' comp, no unemployment, no protections whatsoever. Is that the kind of world we want for our kids? I'm not sure. Let's go to the phones. Got Cheryl Ann on line 1. Cheryl Ann, how are you today?
Fine.
What's on your mind?
I'm fine.
Okay, what's on your mind? What do you got a question, a thought, comment?
Yes. I would like to talk to you about insurance. There's insurance out there for seniors over 65. It's called Senior Life. It pays for everything. Your hospital. It pays for your prescriptions.
Is this one of the Advantage
plans?
plans?
It pays for your doctors.
Is this one of the Advantage
your
plans?
Surgeons. It pays everything.
Okay. All right. Is there a point here? Or is this a sales pitch?
Everybody should check into it.
Okay. I asked you, is this part of the Medicare Advantage? Okay, I appreciate.
I have the number here.
No, I appreciate the call, Cheryl Ann. No, I'm assuming this is one of the Advantage plans that I'm not a fan of in any way, shape, or form. I know a lot of people are pitching these Advantage plans. I've known people who have had them, and there's a lot of sweeteners on the front end. They're able to negotiate drug prices, which is why I think Medicare should be able to do this. But I've known people who down the road got actually sick, and guess what? They got stiffed. It's just one of those things I'm not in favor of, and I'm not going to promote. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line 3. Alice, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
What's on your mind?
You would think that we as a nation, specifically since our right-wing fellow citizens claim to be so moral and upstanding, that you would think that at least we would be able to agree on what definition of the age that a child becomes an adult. That we would be able to say, well, if you're under 18, I'm sorry, you're still considered a child and you can't get married.
Yeah, no.
I just find it ridiculous that they are going, oh, well, 10. That's even worse than back in the Middle Ages, at least. The Catholic Church decided that the age for girls to get married at the youngest age was age 12. So I guess they're going past that.
Yeah, I mean, but again,
but have a good evening, Rick.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it, Alice. No, this is one of those things that, and I got an email here from Janice who says, but you want kids to change their genders. No, I don't. And I think we should be having a conversation about this and not just yelling at each other. And as I've said before, this is one of those things that I don't have all the answers to. But I know government setting hard restrictions on gender-affirming care, I'm struggling with. But what we do know is when you're looking at at marriage ages, we do know there's a lot of abuse in this as well. I want our government to oversee things, not take parental rights away that don't have to be taken away. But we should be protecting kids, and that's across the board. So for me, I'm in the middle of a lot of things. So that's another tough one. The question that I keep coming back to is we get into these polar opposite camps where there are things that we should agree on. We should agree that, marriage should be between consensual adults. I'm sorry, I don't see and I know I've got friends who want to take us back to the good old days where, 13, 14-year-olds got married, started families, and were raised on the farm. That's not the world we live in. And I also have friends on the other side who think that, kids at 7 years old can change their gender. I'm struggling with that one. We as a country are in an interesting moment. But what I see coming out of my friends in the Republican Party is scary. It's dangerous. It's moving us back 100 years to where we're creating a desperation class of workers. And for me, that's always been the wheelhouse. I want to get to another email from John. John says, I'm all in favor of free speech, but I don't believe our founding fathers intended that phrase to end up as free lies. It's not just China and Russia. It's major media outlets like F News and the Republican Party that through proliferation of lies, keep their followers ginned up on fear, hatred, and anger. Somehow the endless repetition of lies on social media has to be reined in, even if it takes legislation to require fact-checking before allowing such posts. And in the computer age, it's really pretty easy for these huge, highly profitable platforms to do so. I'm struggling with this. It's John. I'm struggling with this. The protections that are given to these platforms, I think, have to be reeled back. There's part of me that goes, we have to do something on people identifying who they are, and holding people accountable. Free speech is only free between you and your government. You have the ability to not be censored but between each other. These platforms are cesspools of anger, hatred, and some of the most vile stuff that you're ever going to see. And there's part of me goes, it's by design. It's the reason that it's there. But I appreciate the thoughts, John, and maybe this is where this takes us. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this.
Energy equivalent of 600,000 Hiroshima bombs per day are being stored in the ocean, believe it or not.
World oceans hit highest temperatures ever recorded.
We just keep waiting for things to get better, and they seem to just be getting worse.
Entire West Coast salmon fishery closed due to relentless drought. Plus,
our country's natural treasures define our identity as a nation.
President Biden protects public lands and waters with new national monuments.
All of that good and bad news straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The new UN report warns the climate time bomb is ticking and the world is running out of time to avoid catastrophe.
We are nowhere close to making that Paris Agreement goal. To accomplish all of it, developed and the richest nations in the world would need to reach net zero by 2040. That is going to be nearly impossible.
Wow, that's awful. But I guess a shout out to my baby boomers. Feels like we got the last chopper out of Saigon, doesn't it?
Yep, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, good to see Al Franken doing comedy again.
Yes, it is.
What do you have for us today?
Well, first, on the heels of a bracing new UN climate report warning the world is moving too slowly to avoid catastrophic global warming, now a new study warns of a looming global water crisis.
Great.
And imminent risk of shortages. The study, published by UNESCO on the eve of a crucial UN water summit, finds that, quote, water scarcity is becoming endemic because of overconsumption, overdevelopment, and pollution, and warns that global warming will increase seasonal water shortages everywhere, even in areas with abundant water. The report projects that by 2030, global freshwater demand will outstrip supply by 40% and urges an overhaul of wasteful water practices around the world.
That's a problem.
A different study this week finds that the world's oceans have hit the highest temperatures ever recorded, part of a steady warming trend since 1980. Earth's oceans absorb about 90% of the excess heat generated by humanity's burning of fossil fuels, hitting a new ocean heat record this early in the year, combined with a warming El Nino climate pattern forecast for later this year, will have widespread consequences, warns Florida meteorologist Jeff Berardelli.
More extreme weather, spikes in rainfall because of the extra energy, hurricanes, and the heat index numbers as well, and more intense red tide and blue-green algae, as well as a loss of tropical coral reefs. So the bottom line is, if we want to deal with these problems, we have to combat climate change.
Oh, man, you guys are killing me. Literally.
Officials in the Australian outback face a logistical nightmare in cleaning up a massive, stinky fish kill on the Darling River in New South Wales.
Not so darling now, is it?
Torrential rains swept agricultural fertilizer runoff into rivers. The nutrient pollution, combined with record-shattering heat waves, caused an algae bloom that used up all of the oxygen in the river, suffocating as many as 20 million fish.
We really do suck.
In California, despite a string of punishing winter storms, the western drought has had a delayed effect on salmon populations. Federal fisheries managers have canceled the entire 2023 ocean salmon fishing season along the entire west coast from Oregon to Mexico in an effort to protect fish populations that dramatically dwindled during the ongoing drought.
Now, how did the drought hurt the salmon in the ocean?
Because salmon spawn in the rivers, and the drought prevented them from spawning, causing the population to crash.
Got it.
But some good news. President Biden has issued the first veto of his presidency, rejecting a bill brought by congressional Republicans trying to ban the ESG investment framework that allows investment managers to consider factors such as climate change, environment, and social impacts in long-term investment decisions for pension plans. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, but Republicans mainly objected to the environmental part of the voluntary guidelines, fearing it disadvantages fossil fuels. Pension managers are still required to seek the best returns for their clients.
Actually, they just objected to it because ESG rhymes with CRT, and they got to run against something this year.
Finally, Biden this week also protected large swaths of American wilderness from development, designating new national monuments in Nevada and Texas and a new marine monument in U.S. waters near Hawaii. In Nevada's Mojave Desert, the new Avi Kwame National Monument will protect sacred Native American lands, ancient Joshua trees, and rare wildlife. Scientists say such refuges are critical as global warming dramatically reshapes conditions on land and sea. Here's Biden at a White House conservation summit.
We're protecting the heart and the soul of our national pride. We're protecting pieces of history, telling our story that will be told for generations upon generations to come.
Well, so there is that.
Yep.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we didn't have the heart to get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as we said yesterday, the Federal Reserve raised the interest rates 0.25%. And again, no surprise. Their stated goal at the beginning, you knew what that was. It was, let's screw over working people. Let's have higher unemployment. That was a stated goal, which means lost jobs, which means lost homes, which means broken families. And again, I keep coming back to, why don't we have other tools that we can use? Maybe DC could do something other than rely on the Fed to do what they have to do in these moments. Couldn't we do something better? I'm here to share some thoughts on if there's a better tool. Maybe there's a widget in the toolbox we could use to make this a little bit better. So I've asked my good friend Morris Pearl to come talk with us. He's the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
It's sad, Rick. It really is how the only thing they can do is raise mortgage rates and like car loan rates too, but mostly mortgages. That means fewer people buying houses, fewer people moving and fixing up their houses, and people losing their jobs who are in that kind of business, which are generally not the highest paid people in the world. Guys who, are fixing up houses and stuff like that. But they're hoping that if a lot of those people lose their jobs, they'll switch from like omelets to cereal in the morning, and then the price of eggs won't go up anymore. I mean, that's really the Fed strategy, I think.
Yeah, but when we know that the egg problem has to do with, one, we had a pretty substantial flu problem. Two, they're gouging what out of us because you've got mass consolidation going on. There's a lot of forces outside of just the cost of the whole supply and demand that we believe is out there, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, listen to the CEOs on their talk with investors and Wall Street analysts, places like Chipotle and Wingstop. They'll tell you that as long as they have an excuse to raise prices, prices go up. When the prices of chicken wings and tortillas go down, they don't have to lower the prices. No one's expecting that. Profits way up. And it's like there's nothing the Fed can do about that.
Right.
Maybe the president go out and say, let's all boycott chicken wings and burritos. But there's not the Fed doesn't really have a tool to stop people from doing that as long as consumers have enough money in their pockets to pay for those burritos and eggs and chicken wings and stuff.
And this is where I point to DC being broken and broken on purpose. I believe we're polarized on purpose so that they don't do anything. Because I think, and I've said for a long time, the answer here is you start taxing these corporate profits, especially when the ones that are gouging. I look at the oil industry, who they've had record profits in a time when prices have been overly inflated and people are struggling. For me, that seems to be a tool we should be using more often.
Yeah, but go to these Republicans and even some of the Democrats and talk about corporate taxes. Oh, we have to be competitive. We have to win the race to the bottom. We have to charge less taxes than other countries, or all the rich people will move to countries with lower taxes like Zimbabwe. You notice all your neighbors moving to Zimbabwe, right, Rick?
Yeah. But here's the thing, Morris, you're the one who lives on Park Avenue. I don't. Do you see your neighbors going to Zimbabwe? That's the question.
Well, we do have that one guy who moved from Fifth Avenue to Mar-a-Lago a couple of years. But other than that, no. I mean, there's plenty of people here on Park Avenue, believe me. We've got kids lined up to go to school in the morning and waiting for their limos to show up to bring them to their private schools.
But this is an interesting conversation, because I have a friend who he grew up in Brazil, and he said you don't want to end up like we were. His family was fairly affluent. They had to have bodyguards all the time. They had to live in gated communities. You know, their every movement was all about security and worrying, you know, what could happen. And, you know, you're not going to see rich people going to these third world countries to get away from paying taxes because of that.
That is exactly why we created the Patriotic Millionaires, because we have hundreds of wealthy people around the country who are afraid of that, who don't want to bring up their children and grandchildren. I have one granddaughter now, in a situation like where rich people are afraid of being kidnapped or worse. And so we are trying to go to our lawmakers and tell them that it's not working. We don't want to live in a country with millions of people who can't get by, who are struggling, and a few, even if we're part of a few rich people. That's not a fun way. That's not how I want to live, Rick.
No,
I don't think that's how anybody wants to live, really, or very few people.
And the story that he told was, you know, it was just horrible. You know, daily life was difficult because of the logistics, and I don't think anybody really wants that hassle. But hey, you know, you saved a little bit on your tax bill. But here's the other question I get a lot. You know, so I'm advocating for higher taxes on corporations. Don't they just pass it on to the consumers in higher prices?
Well, I mean, if they could charge higher prices, they would. Chipotle charges as much for burritos as they think you're willing to pay. If they thought you were willing to pay more for that burrito, they'd raise the prices today. So if you charge Chipotle more taxes, they'll make less profit. And yeah, that's true. They'll make less profit, and the owners, the people that own the stock, you know, won't do quite as well. Ask Warren Buffett. He'll tell you that a large percentage of his increase in wealth over the last few years was because they changed the federal tax rate from 34% down to 21%. And that suddenly made Berkshire Hathaway worth so much more.
Yeah.
You know, and he's one of the wealthiest people in the world because of that. We've had this huge shift in which people that own businesses have become hugely more wealthy over the last few years since the 2017 tax bill, and everyone else practically is just struggling to get by. And that's making the country move the wrong direction, and it's not good.
No, but the argument I get from that is, well, that person started a business. They should be able to keep everything that they own, and they worked for it, Morris. You worked for everything that you've got. You shouldn't have to share. That's the right-wing argument to everything that we talk about. This kind of, it's mine. You know, like a 2-year-old in the cereal aisle. It's mine.
Well, everybody who has any money worked for it in some way or another. Actually, a typical truck driver works a lot more than an investor does. I sit here and just look at the numbers on my computer screen during the day, and I think I do a lot less work than most members of the Teamsters do. But, you know, I'm not any more deserving than anybody else is. I should pay at least the same tax rates as people who actually do work for a living. And sure, everybody deserves what they work for.
This comes into what President Biden is talking about, a minimum tax on billionaires, because, you know, as you point out, you should probably pay at least as much as someone who's driving the truck or, you know, swinging a hammer.
Yeah, it's not like we need a special tax incentive to be a hedge fund manager. We do not have a shortage of people willing to be hedge fund managers. It's not like we have to lower their taxes or people will find something else to do. We may have a shortage of emergency room nurses. I might be agreeable to charging them lower tax rates than everyone else if we need more people to work as nurses in our hospital emergency rooms. But no, I don't see any reason that we need to encourage people to be hedge fund managers.
No, I'm right there with you. But, you know, here's the thing, and this is the other part of this. Nobody's talking about going back to the good old days when we had a socialist president like Dwight David Eisenhower. Nobody's talking about that kind of taxation. Well, me sometimes. But nobody's really in a serious way talking about going back to a top marginal tax rate of 92%.
Well, I mean, we could. The people who complain the most, you know, like the guys who started Home Depot, you know, they did that when they were paying over 70%, you know, as a marginal tax rate. And they didn't even move out of New York, for God's sakes. Ken Langone lived right near the New York at his office right in front of the New York Public Library the whole time. And he paid 70% of his taxes. And he thought that was exactly the right time to start a business that became hugely successful. So people did that. I mean, you could argue whether America was more or less great in the 1950s and 60s, but it was doing okay when rich people paid higher tax rates than working people.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Morris Pearl, chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. You want to check out the work that they're doing. Patrioticmillionaires.org is the website. I got to get your thoughts on something else that's going on. We've talked about these non-compete agreements that, places like Jimmy John's tried to get their workers to sign on to, so that, hey, you can't go across the street and make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich over there because that's proprietary on this side of the street. But we're seeing all of this attempt, by corporations to press down wages, to stop people from moving from job to job. And I'm starting to see the DOJ doing something about that. What are you coming across?
They're trying, and I think they're doing the right thing. There was a case that just came up in Maine. Maine increased reimbursement rates for healthcare providers, like the agencies that send people to your house to help you get dressed if you're too decrepit to do that yourself. And Maine increased the amount of money those agencies get. And according to the Department of Justice, the 4 owners of the companies in the Portland area got together by text messages and agreed not to give their workers raises and to refuse to hire anyone who had worked for one of the other 4 companies. And unfortunately, I think they were all acquitted by a federal jury the other day. But I think it was because they proved they did these things. They couldn't really prove they were in agreement based on crazy text messages, between English and Arabic. But I think the Department of Justice is finally trying to crack down on these things and tell people, no, it's not legal to agree with your competitors to not hire each other. It's not legal for Jimmy John's and Burger King to have an agreement not for one to hire people that work for the other. And I think they're trying to work on that, and they need to, because that really cuts down on wages of the lowest paid people, because those are the people who are susceptible to these crazy agreements. It's not the wealthy people. They can hire lawyers and they know the laws. It's these really low paid people that can't move, and only have a very limited amount of things they can do. And if there's only 3 or 4 companies that hire these home aides and the other 3 won't talk to you, you're stuck.
Yeah.
You're like an indentured servant. It's not right. That's not the American way.
But we're told the free market, the invisible hand, you should be able to, these firms should be competing, and yet they're behind the scenes colluding in ways to ensure that they get wealthier and the working folks don't. And this is where, again, I keep coming back to this higher tax rates on these corporations, because and maybe I'm just imagining a better time, but I don't know that you saw this kind of thing then. I know people who ran businesses back in the 50s and 60s, and they say it was a different time. You knew your profit margins were going to be lower, wages were higher. The profits, the benefits, the spoils, if you were broadly shared. Everyone did better. It was a better time, from what I'm told.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was just hearing from, the historian David Brinkley last night that it was Ronald Reagan who gave people permission not to feel empathy for their neighbors.
That's true.
And that's the change that was really made in the 1980s, was for people not to feel any empathy for other people in their community. And I mean, it seems like they succeeded.
No, it was all in the rhetoric. Hooray for me! The one who dies with the most toys wins. That was that era. Greed is good. That you're right. I mean,
Michael Douglas with his horizontal stripes on his shirt. Yeah, I mean, that's how people want to grow up. And even these anti-union guys, I don't want to be in a place where people have rules about pay. I want to be by myself, an entrepreneur where I can work harder and, I don't know, help the business owner get richer, I guess. I don't know.
Now, you're not against people getting rich, obviously.
I'm in favor of people getting rich. I run an organization called Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org. So we suggest everyone become a millionaire. But we suggest that those people who do become millionaires recognize that part of it is good fortune, being in the right place at the right time, growing up in the right place, having the right parents, having parents who can support you when you're getting started and trying to create a new business, as almost all of these billionaires have. And that for those reasons, you should be paying at least the same tax rates as people that work for a living and feeling some responsibility to your in favor of your society.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, I look at someone like Jeff Bezos and the kind of legacy that he could have, or any of these billionaires, the legacy that they could end childhood hunger and poverty in this country in ways that no generation in the past has done. You can do amazing things with the kind of wealth that some of our billionaire class has. We just don't.
We don't, and they don't feel an obligation to. Yes, I have no problem if somebody wants to become rich and go off in space or build a giant clock or do whatever else you want to do with your money. But you should also be paying some of it in taxes so that our society, through our democratic mechanisms, should decide how some of the money should be spent. Yep. Jeff Bezos is very smart and he works hard, but he also had parents who give him hundreds of thousands of dollars when he was starting Amazon. And yeah, a lot of people are smart and work hard, but don't have any capital to start a business and don't even have the ability to take off without pay for years while you're starting a new business. But some of these people, like Jeff Bezos, did. Mark Zuckerberg did. Bill Gates did have families that could do all those things for them. And yeah, sure, they're billionaires, and that's great. But also, they had certain opportunities that very few people have, frankly.
I want to get your thoughts finally on this story out of New York. The Niagara Gazette had a story, I guess the other day, that said that the New York Power Authority has awarded nearly 10.7 megawatt allocation of low-cost Niagara Power Project hydropower to this Niagara County planned Amazon facility. Should we be giving more corporate welfare to Amazon? This is the kind of stuff that drives me crazy. They should be paying their own electric bill, and maybe we use that power in other ways. I'm struggling with this.
Yeah, that's why Alcoa is in New York, frankly, because Alcoa used huge amounts of electricity to make the aluminum. They wanted to be near that Niagara Power facility, so that's why they built their aluminum plant there. But yeah, I think that these people are falling over themselves, saying, oh, we need Amazon here. We need that kind of jobs. And I'm not sure if warehouse workers, schlepping boxes around is necessarily the kind of job that's best for New York, and whether we should be using our taxpayer money to subsidize that. I highly question that. I really do.
Right there with you. Morris, as always, good stuff. I hope you come back next week and share some more with us as all of the insanity continues. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rick. Great to be in your show.
Good stuff. Morris Pearl, chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Got to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, the more I talk to Morris, the more we hear from our friends over at the Patriotic Millionaires, the more incensed I get that our system has been set up in such a way that the wealth class continues to be heaped with all of these rewards, all the corporate welfare they could want, all of the tax breaks, with this still idea that somehow it's going to trickle down. And I love the idea, the argument, well, if you tax the rich people, they're going to leave. You just heard a really rich guy, I mean, probably one of the richest people I've ever met, say, I'm not going anywhere because I don't want to live in a place where I've got to have security around every corner, where I've got to live in a gated community where I'm worried about someone scaling the wall. I've been saying this for years. The wealth class does not want the pitchforks to come out. And they're not going to leave if you pay taxes, if they're forced to pay taxes, because they're not going to go to a place where the pitchforks are already out. We should be taxing corporate America and these wealthy folks, not to punish them, but to do the things that we need to get done. We need infrastructure. We need education. We need health care. We need all of these things. And I hear people, well, we can't afford it. Yes, we can. We just choose not to. And for me, all of the other stuff, I got a bunch of emails from people, they want to talk about the transgender stuff. And I'm like, not my issue. You know what my issue is? Making sure that every worker has a decent wage that they can live on, that they can support their families on, that if they get sick, they get the care that they need. If they are lucky enough to get to retirement age, that their retirement takes them through to the final end. That they have dignity and respect in life and not having to beg in desperate moments. See, this is the difference in a lot of our politics. And our politicians are just as bad at this. We don't hear people talking about how do we make people's lives better? How do we make working class lives better? How do we make sure that people have an ability to lead a good, productive life? How do we do that? I mean, FDR was great at this. Talking about the four freedoms. Incredible stuff, powerful stuff, necessary stuff. But, what we get from our politics today, more division, more hatred, more things to keep us at each other's throats, as opposed to how do we move forward and make sure that everyone leads a decent life. It's angering. Because ultimately what has happened over the years is they've figured out how to divide and conquer us. And I think we need, as a working class, need to reclaim those four freedoms that FDR talked about. Having freedom of speech, true speech, not lies and all of the stuff that we see, but being able to speak truth to power. The freedom to follow your conscience and worship however you choose and not push that onto everybody else. Freedom from want, meaning that, you're not going to go hungry, that you're not going to be pushed out into the cold if you're sick, meaning that you're not going to have to live under a bridge somewhere if you don't have retirement security. And freedom from fear. We should be talking about reclaiming those. Instead, what we're fed constantly, steady diet of outrage, steady diet of fear and hatred, and your neighbor's bad. And I don't buy it. As much as I detest the policies coming out of the right, you're not going to hear me say that they're Satanists. of the vile stuff I've heard is really scary. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day the trial of 101 industrial workers of the world began in Chicago. Their alleged crimes? Speaking out against U.S. involvement in World War I. They were tried under the Espionage Act. But they were really targeted for prosecution because of their outspoken and radical labor organizing. In Chicago, 87 members of the union were held in the Cook County Jail for nearly a year before their trial. The so-called evidence in the case consisted mainly of newspaper articles and letters written by the IWW members. Most of them were before the U.S. had even entered the war. The trial lasted until August. The presiding judge was Kenshaw Mountain Landis, who shortly after the verdict would leave the bench to become the commissioner of Major League Baseball. In all, 150 Wobblies faced charges in Chicago, Wichita, Kansas, and Sacramento, California. Many received harsh sentences ranging from 5 to 25 years in prison. One of those convicted was Ralph Chaplin, the author of the labor anthem Solidarity Forever. In Leavenworth Prison, he continued to write verse. His poems reflected his yearning for freedom, including the lines, "Somewhere the dawn breaks laughing o'er the sea. To splash with gold the city's domes and towers, and countless men seek visions wide and free. In that alluring world that is now ours. But no one there could prize as much as we the open road, the smell of grass and flowers." In 1924, the last IWW prisoner from these trials was finally released from prison. But the crackdown had taken a major toll on labor organizations across the nation. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
What's wrong with us? Our nation's moral compass, I mean. I don't like being a downer, just focusing on wrongs, but some wrongs stand out as morally abominable, such as this one. It's about hundreds of thousands of our low-income elders who, toward the end of life, when frail and most vulnerable, find themselves cast into a part of the Medicaid system that has been deliberately structured by Congress to subject them to needless deprivations and daily indignities. These are our loved ones with serious health problems who need long-term care in nursing homes, and 2/3 of them rely on Medicaid to cover their costs. To get this benefit, they surrender all of their income, which goes to defray their nursing home expenses. Of course, for a decent existence beyond mere survival, we all rely on a few little things that are basic to our humanity. So Medicare authorizes each state to set a monthly, quote, personal needs allowance so their elderly patients can cover their hygiene and grooming products, a book or CD, a small gift for grandchildren, a chocolate bar, etc. Good, but then Mr. Mingy walked in. In 1987, Congress set the minimum for this allowance at a meager $30 a month, under $8 a week. Congress has not raised it in the 36 years since, and most states still provide only a pittance, despite inflation and monopoly price gouging on practically everything. So our state and national leaders, who freely dole out massive corporate subsidies and tax giveaways to billionaires, are leaving ill seniors with so little spending money that they must ration their toothpaste and scrimp pennies to buy a rare treat from the vending machine. This is Jim Hightower saying, I know this is small in the global scale of human indignities, but that makes it an even bigger moral failure for our society. It would take so little to do so much for so many.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So on Tuesday, our friends over at the American Federation of Government Employees held a press conference to roll out this new report that they have talking about, things that are going on in government employment and over at the VA and how we take care of our heroes. And again, this is stuff that we've talked about for a very long time. The fact that our VAs are understaffed, doesn't seem to be a whole lot of urgency to get those positions filled. And the funding's always a problem. So, of course, if you're understaffed and you're underfunded, you got to think morale probably not going to be that great. That's why I've asked Suzanne Gordon to come talk with us. She's a senior policy analyst at the Veterans Healthcare Policy Institute. Veteranspolicy.org is the website if you want to check that out. She's also the author of Our Veterans, Wounds of War, and a whole library of other books. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Suzanne, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So walk me through this report that came out on Tuesday. How are things at the VA? What's the general finding here?
So basically, the Veterans Healthcare Policy Institute conducted a survey of 90,000 VBA and VHA staff. So these are people who work processing benefit claims at the largest benefit system in the United States, the Veterans Benefit Administration. They oversee or give access to home loans and the GI Bill, which is free education, and financial compensation for any service-related problems. And then the other group that we sent this survey out to was veterans staff, over 300 of them, or we sent them to not all 300,000, but the staff at the Veterans Health Administration, which is the largest healthcare system in the United States and the only coordinated healthcare system in the United States. And, the VA continues to deliver care that is far superior to that is delivered to non-veterans in the private sector healthcare system. But the problem is, as the title of our report suggests, and this is the report is entitled "Disadvantaging the VA: How VA Staff View Agency Privatization and Other Detrimental Policies." And basically what's been happening over the past almost decade, since 2014, is that more and more care of veterans and benefit processing of veterans has been privatized and outsourced to private sector providers and evaluators of veterans' complex health conditions that really don't have experience with veterans' complex health conditions.
Right.
And the VHA delivers stellar care. I mean, the one thing that we found was that VA employees, whether at the VBA or the VHA, are deeply dedicated to serving veterans. The problem is that they are being hamstrung. They are being stopped from doing the kind of job that they know they could do and the kind of job that they try to do anyway and often succeed in spite of VA leadership. And so we asked them about staffing shortages. 96% of those who work in the VHA, the Health Administration, said they need more frontline clinical staff. 75% said they need more administrative staff. 77% said that there are vacant positions for which no recruitment is taking place. The VA now has 76,000 vacancies, right?
Wow. Now that's up from during, just several, I guess it's been like 5 or 6 years ago. It was up from 50,000.
Yes, when I started writing about VA healthcare in 2014, it was 34,000. During Trump, during COVID, it was 50,000. Now it's 76. And you have to understand, Rick, that, because of COVID, healthcare workers are, they're quitting in droves. They're burnt out, right? There's competition from hospitals in the private sector, for any living, breathing person who could be at a bedside, and they're offering signing bonus and so on. And the VA is not even allowed to offer competitive salaries. I mean, 77%, the 55% of VA employees respondents said that even though there's this huge, vacancy rate, they have been taken away and given less time to deliver direct care to patients and support of patients than they had 4 years ago. And why is that? because of the brilliance of our Congress and also VA leadership's refusal to reverse some of these outsourcing policies, basically they're taking a lot of staff who used to give direct care to patients, and they're asking them to supervise the care that private sector providers provide, and that's a mission impossible. I mean, 82% of the respondents said their work referring, monitoring, coordinating outside care has increased in the last 4 years. We cite a psychologist in the report who basically used to spend all her time, dealing with patients, giving therapy to patients. And now she's, looking at referrals to private sector providers whom she has no control over. This program that was initiated in the VA Mission Act of 2018, which has outsourced, the care of something like 60% of VA patients to the private sector. It's now eating up almost 50% of the VA's clinical care budget is going to pay private sector providers that the secretary says are doing a worse job of taking care of veterans. Care is more fragmented. There's more problems. Veterans don't like it. There's longer wait times in the private sector, even though this whole thing was set up to decrease wait times. There's shorter wait times at the VA. And yet, as our respondents have shown, there's nothing being done to seriously reconsider this program that is not working. Yeah. And that's only talking about the VHA. If you want to talk about what's going on at the Benefits Administration, which is really, really important to veterans and their dependents, I can give you an earful about that.
Yeah, I'm sure, because I'm listening to this and I'm going, oh my God, it sounds like the sky is falling. I mean, you got massive shortages, you've got low wages, you've got probably morale problems because people are working longer and harder and not being able to spend as much time as they need to taking care of people. So the satisfaction that they would get from the job normally isn't there either. It sounds like a perfect storm of horrible. And this is, in my view, exactly what's supposed to happen from the people who want to destroy the VA and privatize it so they can profitize it. And for me, this goes back to the Trump years and the things that they did and the poison pills that have been put in place there.
Well, you're absolutely right. But the tragic thing is that these initiatives were supported by the majority of Democrats in Congress.
It's all bad.
And, there are too many of our political representatives who buy this idea, that the private sector can do no wrong and government can do no right. And we show with the VA, the VA has study after study after study shows the VA delivers better care. These people are, as you say, they're delivering care with one arm tied behind their back, and they're still beating, the competition, which is the private sector, where care, I mean, you're a private sector patient. I'm assuming I'm a private sector patient. I mean, care coordination, it's a mess out there. It's delays.
Well, I can attest to that.
Yeah, and I think that what's tragic about the Biden administration, in my view, and Dennis McDonough's leadership, is that he's a very nice man and he's very well-intentioned, I'm sure, but he is not reversing Trump-era policies. I mean, one of the things that Trump did to cripple the VA was to launch this human resources modernization project, which was ostensibly to unblock any cumbersome HR processes that were making it more difficult to hire and onboard and deal with HR problems. HR is, it's very unsexy, HR, right? It turns out HR is like, the hub of everything. I mean, you're an employee, you hurt your back, you want to, transfer to a new job, where do you go? HR. Yeah. You want to recruit people, where do you go? HR. You want to get the card that allows you to access the electronic medical record, where do you go? HR. Well, Trump, in his infinite unwisdom, basically took all HR functions out of local VAs and put them in a regional and central office. They've gone online. You can never reach anybody. And, vast percentages of those we surveyed said that this is a disaster. It's crippling hiring. They're losing candidates. So the secretary and the VA says that they're hiring, that they're trying to hire. Yeah, they're trying to hire, but they can't hire fast enough because the HR modernization project is such a disaster. And, they're not reversing it. They could reverse it, and they're not reversing it.
No, my question on that front is, who made money off of it? I mean, if you went to this, who benefited from doing what Trump did? Because to me, there's always someone who benefits.
Well, it's probably the online program makers.
Exactly.
I mean, it's very clear when you look at BHA who's benefiting. I mean, there's $128 billion pot of dollars, that's going to clinical care at the VA, and private sector providers, right, who are profit driven, are getting like more and more, half of that money. I mean, let me give you a startling statistic, Rick. Between 2017 and 2021, the budget for private sector care in the VA increased by 116%. During the same time, even though demand for care was increasing inside the VA, the budget for in-house care increased 32%.
Wow.
I mean, I rest my case. And the VBA, the VBA gets a lot less attention than the VHA. This is the largest benefits processing organization and servicing organization in the United States. And they do not have enough staff. The Biden administration, I believe it was, initiated this talk time productivity standards, these punishing productivity standards that tell these claims processors who are dealing with veterans very complex claims, for all sorts of things. They only have like a very short amount of time to talk to a veteran, and then they're supposed to hang up.
Yeah, that's not new though. I don't know that was Biden. That's something I remember from years ago.
No, this is a talk time initiative. Is new. And I mean, they've always been short staffed, right? They've always been short staffed. They've always had problems. They've always had backlogs. But this productivity standards is new. And the other thing that's new from the point of view of the VBA is that under Trump, they outsourced 90% of these what are called compensation and PEN exams, compensation and pension exams, CNP exams. These used to be done by knowledgeable VHA clinicians who understood veterans' complex problems. And you have to in order to get compensation for a service-related problem, you have to get what's called a disability rating. They have to ascertain that, that you actually served, where you served, what the problem is, and connect it to your service. And then you get compensation, and you also get a rating that allows you to get care at the Veterans Health Administration. Well, these exams used to be very rigorously delivered by people who knew what they were looking at, knew the jargon, knew the language, knew the illnesses, knew how to process the claims effectively. Now they're being outsourced to private for-profit companies. And, our respondents said that at VBA said that they're aside from the punishing work schedules, that these exams are being poorly and shoddily conducted. They make their work harder. They have to get them redone. So, the long and short of it is you have dedicated staff, deeply dedicated staff. The problem isn't that they're not paid enough. They're well paid. They have very good benefits. They have good union jobs, but they're certainly, for clinicians, they're not competitive with the private sector because there's this cockamamie, law that says that the VHA can't really compete. They can't offer market rate salaries. There's some exceptions, And, they're not allowed to offer salaries to doctors, more than the president makes. Well, try to get, an interventional cardiologist or brain surgeon for $400,000. Good luck, And, but basically the problem is that the staffing issue, they're not hiring fast enough. They may be hiring, but they're not hiring fast enough. Many of the staff they hire are being used as utilization reviewers of for-profit private sector care, and they're not supporting their workforce effectively in their actions as opposed to their words.
Wow, it sounds like a whole lot of horrible. So in a minute, because we've got about a minute left, what's the action for people who want to fix this?
So basically, call your congressperson, lobby. The secretary of the VA has the rulemaking authority to reverse the Mission Act privatization by changing the standards that determine whether veterans can get care outside the VA. He can do that without an act of Congress. Right now, get this, Rick, get this. If you get an appointment for telehealth in the VA tomorrow, that doesn't count as access to care. If you get an appointment for telehealth in the private sector in 3 weeks, that counts as access to care. The secretary has said that nutty policy should be reversed. He has the authority to reverse it. He can start the process tomorrow. He needs to be pressured to do that. And people need to really pressure their political representatives to start adequately funding the VA, to cap the amount of money going to this, outsourced care, and to insource care into the VA and to really support VA staff.
There you go. I'm just every time I talk about this, I get angry because these are the people that we called heroes. We sent them into harm's way, and now we are not taking care of them. So it's infuriating to hear that things are going this way, which is why, again, people should be calling their representatives early and often. I suggest doing that tomorrow. Suzanne, I appreciate you taking time. I hope folks will check out the website, veteranspolicy.org. Suzanne Gordon, Senior Policy Analyst at the Veterans Healthcare Policy Institute. Thanks so much for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
This is where I generally say good stuff, but not so much. This is angering stuff. And I want everybody to be angry about this because we should be. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Do you know that it used to be legal for employers in the United States to make their employees sign a contract promising that they would never join a union? Such agreements were often referred to as yellow dog contracts. Organizers in the labor movement said that you would have to be no better than a yellow dog to go to work under such an agreement. The term started to be used in labor newspapers in the 1920s. In 1921, the editor of the United Mine Workers Journal argued that such a contract reduces to the level of a yellow dog any man who signs it, for he signs away every right he possesses under the Constitution and laws of the land, and makes himself the truckling, helpless slave of the employer. Yet thousands of workers face the choice between unemployment and signing away their right to organize. Needing to feed themselves and their families, they went to work under the repressive contracts. Such agreements were particularly prevalent in the coal mining industry. And so, on this day in labor history, the year was 1932. Yellow dog contracts were made illegal in the private sector. The act was named after its sponsors, Progressive Republicans, Nebraska Senator George W. Norris, and New York Representative Fiorello LaGuardia. Section 2 of the act declared that a worker would, quote, have full freedom of association, self-organization, and designation of representatives of his own choosing, to negotiate the terms and conditions of his employment, and that he shall be free from the interference, restraint, or coercion of the employers of labor or their agents. The passage of this and other laws in the 1930s helped to usher in the greatest period of growth in the U.S. labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Angry emails that disagree with me, right to the top. In fact, I got one, long one, from a Trump supporter who said, is there anything that I agree with Trump or Ron DeSantis on? And I've said before, there are some things I agreed with Trump on. Some of the trade stuff, the China stuff, your tariffs, absolutely. The DeSantis thing, I haven't spent a lot of time on DeSantis, but the one thing that it just happened that I am 100% behind Ron DeSantis on it, and don't run, listen. He is coming out and saying that in Florida, his words, they're going to expressly forbid the use of the digital currency, central bank digital currency. No digital stuff. He said, his word, cash is king. The minute it's all digitized, somebody else is going to have control over your life. And I agree with this. See, there are things that the right and the left can agree on. This is one of those. And I like to build on this because there's an opportunity to go, I'm not so keen on centralization of this kind of stuff, especially currency. Because as easily as they can give it to you, they can turn it off. It's the same thing with the electric cars. I've got some struggles with electric cars. I think they're cool. I think powering automobiles in a different way is fabulous if we can figure it out. But the centralization of information and the fact that those cars are now going to be on a network, potentially that can be turned off, or in the case, I don't know if you saw the story that Ford is moving towards, I think it was either a patent or the right to exclusive use to be able to recall a car, to repossess it. You don't make your payment. You just wake up one morning and it's gone. But no repo man took it. You go to the grocery store and they hit the button and say, yeah, we're going to take it. It just drives itself back to wherever they want. I got a problem with that. I have a problem with this kind of centralization of power. And it's interesting that there's some, even fascists, like even someone who I see as someone extremely fascistic, like Ron DeSantis, even he sees this. Now, does this mean I would ever vote for Ron DeSantis? No, I think all of the other things, much, much, much crazier. And the stuff that he's brought to the front and made news, what's interesting, and again, I look at the moment in history that we're in. According to an AP study, story that just came out, evidently DeSantis and his administration are moving forward on a plan to forbid any discussion, any instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity at all through any, and eventually they're just going to wipe it out entirely. Nothing. We're all going to go back to believing nonsense and myths. But it's incredible that these are people who, they used to say keep government out of our lives, and yet seem to be in many areas pushing it in. So to finish up on my email, there is something that I agree with Ron DeSantis on. I'm surprised at it too. I'm shocked as anyone. But there you go. Yesterday I found out I was brave. Today I found out I agree with Ron DeSantis on something. See, we can all grow. We can all come together. We can all find common ground. And I want to hear from you. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.